One of my most popular videos to date was about how to escalate sexual tension without being creepy. And if you resonate with any of the content in the nice guy space, this one piece is the most common variable that we actually need to work on in order for you to authentically generate that sexual attraction with women that you're interested in. Because I've seen this pattern over and over again, having done discovery calls with men who sound like different variations of the same underlying problem. And it's usually that they are men with emotional depth and capacity who've done a lot of heart work. They've gone to therapy, they've read the books, they watch the YouTube videos, and they're really genuinely invested in the women in their lives, having a good experience of being across from them. And yet, they're wondering why, after having done all of this work, it's not translating into the type of relationship that they're looking for. And the reason is that you have learned how to tap into this heart space without any kind of differentiation. And by that, I just mean your ability to stay with your thoughts, your experience, your beliefs, while being with someone else in a heart-centered connection. This is what I want to dive into today and give some examples about how this shows up in real life in case this is something that you've been noticing for yourself too. If you're new to my work, my name's Courtney Shand. I love helping men with depth date. I just find that there's a little more nuance than what is generally out there. And this is what I want to talk about today, because you've probably combed through all of that information already and you're looking for that little extra nuance. So let's dive in. The reality is, if you've been in the dating space wanting to create a healthy long-term sexual connection or relationship with someone, you will probably recognize some of these patterns. And before I share these, I just want to say this doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you, but I want to zoom into these because this is how it's playing out, and I want for you to be able to see this through a new lens. Because the reality is, you've been trying to solve this math problem with half the variables. That's why 2 + 2 isn't equaling 4 when you're sitting down to do this type of problem solving. So we're going to break down the two sides of this equation so that you have all of the facts in front of you. And you can start using that analytical part of your mind more appropriately. When I was thinking about the most common examples that I hear, and these are common enough that they aren't one or two people. This is multiple people who have reported these same patterns that I'm going to talk about. I would love to hear from you in the comments if there's some other ones that maybe I missed. Let's see if any of these sound familiar. You stay in situationships longer than you need to. Maybe she's still hooked on an ex or isn't quite clear on what she wants, or specifically what she wants with you. And because you don't want to come across as being avoidant, you stay and wait, you give her space, you allow her to operate in her life because you're trying to not be controlling or avoidant. Or maybe when you do experience frustration or even anger because a boundary has been violated, you have a hard time expressing that in a healthy way because you don't want to be seen as toxic masculine. And probably the most common is that you're going to struggle with saying no without feeling excessive guilt or like you need to really justify or explain your reasoning behind your choice. And some of the more subtle ways that I see this show up as I'm hearing men's stories is in this almost compulsion to prioritize her emotional process and experience over your own level of clarity, or feeling like you need to talk through every emotion so that you're not stonewalling or, again, avoidant. And I want to zoom in on this nuance because a lot of the men who find my work have a history of knowing their attachment theory, and a lot of times they have enough knowledge to be able to discern when they are being avoidant. And yet what I find is that they have a misidentification of what avoidance looks like in practice, which is why they are staying in situations that is creating this internal frustration for them, because they can sense on one level that something's not correct. This isn't how it's supposed to be or feel. And yet they feel a little bit out of control or powerless to actually change the situation. But let me be very clear that this has never been about your openness. It's that you have learned how to be open without that level of differentiation that makes you uniquely you. You're actually just too porous. And I get how frustrating this is to find this line, because this was something that I had to really work on myself. And this is why I always say that there's some extra nuance, especially if you're someone with depth, because the same information that would apply to someone who is truly Avoidant is not going to apply to someone who tends to stay too long in situations. And yet what we do, and I'm including myself in this again because this was my journey too, is we take that information as confirmation that we are needing to apply more of the strategy that hasn't been working previously. And because it's like our dominant hand, we assume that putting some more finesse into the situation is going to resolve the issue. And what I have found is that that's almost never actually the case. We need to integrate some of the alternative piece that we are usually spending a lot of emotional energy trying to prove that we're not like. So not more of what we have been doing and not the thing that we're afraid of being, but really finding this integrated path forward is what I'm aiming for in all of my work. Because I'm willing to bet that you can already feel deeply. You just have a hard time holding your ground. You're already empathetic. You just tend to lose yourself in situations that require your empathy. And you probably are already very attuned to her. The problem is that you're disconnected from yourself. And the reason that this is so sneaky is because for so many of my clients, even when I was working with women, you spend so much time trying to prove that you're not like X, Y, and Z, the avoidant type, the type who won't do the work, the toxic type, that it's actually stunting you from taking the actions that are needed and appropriate for you in that situation. And not only is this killing attraction, but it's keeping you feeling like any move that you make makes you the, pardon my language, the asshole in the situation. So you find yourself in this lose-lose double bind where no matter what you choose, you're either going to feel authentic or you're going to have to feel like not yourself. And when those are the only two options, it's very difficult to get close to someone because getting close to someone emotionally actually requires us to zoom in on what is ours and be able to stay with the information that comes through about us so that the other person can actually be responding to that information instead of the version of ourselves that we present in those situations that we think gives us the approval or the confirmation that we're not like these bad qualities that we are trying to stay away from. I've talked about differentiation before as a psychological concept. Really, it is your ability to be yourself in a situation with other people. Your ability to draw lines of where you end and what makes you you, and be able to hold on to that to some degree, especially in social settings, intimate settings, and situations where I'm willing to bet that you were maybe unknowingly conditioned to believe that the greater good is more important than your needs and experience. And while on some level, that can be true and very pro-social. We have to be able to negotiate our needs with the people around us if we want to maintain a level of connection with the people around us. And where I see this going most awry for people is that they have this underlying belief that my needs put me opposed to everyone else. And so they instinctively tamp down their own needs and desires in any situation and allow the other person to move kind of front and center. Again, this isn't a problem if it is a reciprocal dynamic where you're each able to give and receive and have a general meeting of each other's needs. But if you're the one who's consistently feeling like, why is this not working for me? This has been probably one of the most anchoring practices that I have learned in my own life and teach to a lot of men because it requires a lot of masculine energy. It requires us to be willing to be seen and to learn how to be with tension that viscerally arises when we say, this is me, this is who I am, and this is what I would like or need. But our ability to do that is what allows us to stay present, to stay grounded, and really to stay ourselves. And when we learn how to practice respecting ourselves, other people naturally follow suit. Or it becomes very clear those who are not willing to do that, and we can make appropriate decisions in that moment. Here's how this plays out in real life. When we aren't willing to do that, we end up finding ourselves in roles where we're more of the emotional support person. You feel like the sidekick or the understudy instead of that main character energy. And like it or not, you are actually meant to be the main character, the one who's making the decisions in your life about your needs getting met. This is what it means to be fully responsible for yourself. It doesn't mean that you're an island and you don't need anyone else, but it is going to distinguish people who are available for partnership versus those those who are just looking for the type of support that you're capable of providing. In order to do that, we have to learn how to tolerate tension. And this is something that I see a lot of men struggling with, which is why we have an entire course on this called Grounded, because our ability to be with tension viscerally without needing to resolve it, smooth it over, laugh it off, and make sure that everyone else is comfortable is what's going to allow us to genuinely provide empathy in a way that feels both authentic and honoring to us and another person. It's kind of like friction. Tension in relationships is like friction physically. There is a certain amount of it needed for us to move anywhere. If we didn't have it, it would be like us trying to walk on ice everywhere we go. You're not going to get anywhere quickly. But when you understand how to create the right type of friction, you have a little bit more control and mastery over the situation that you find yourself in. And instead of getting frustrated or feeling out of control, you can put the right support in place so that you can more naturally move through that scenario. In addition to figuring out how to work with tension, it also requires you to tap into your actual needs and desires within a relationship. Because it's really hard for you to co-create a reciprocal relationship when you're either not clear on or not communicating transparently, or more importantly, viscerally, because women are visceral communicators first and foremost. If you're not tapped into what it is that you're desiring and or needing in a relationship, it's going to be really hard for you to communicate that information to someone and see if there's genuine compatibility in being able to depend on each other to meet those needs together. The biggest way that I see men shutting down what could be a really natural exchange with someone is either in that they've been taught to suppress their needs or their desires, or they're not clear about what they are. And so they think that they're avoiding creating discomfort by keeping those to themselves, not realizing that they're smoothing out any friction and wondering why they're feeling like they're running on ice. And as a result of that, the last way that I see this showing up is how your anxiety comes forward. Because when you're not distinct within yourself, it means that you're only comfortable when everyone else is okay. And again, there's a pro-social element to this, of being aware of how you impact other people and that exchange that happens between you and the people around you. Not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about is when you don't know how to soothe yourself and reassure yourself, you're actually putting into the space for other people to soothe and reassure you. This is creating a kind of reverse dependency that's going to show up really subtly but energetically in all of the actions you take. This is why when you think you're being attentive, she experiences it as you needing reassurance. It's this inverted dynamic that gets created that stunts attraction from forming. Because like I've mentioned before, polarity requires us to be with tension in the same way that walking requires us to be with friction and gravity. There just are some natural laws that we need to learn how to work with, because when we don't, it's much harder for us to move in the way that we want. That said, if you recognize yourself in any of these, it doesn't mean that you're broken or that you've necessarily been doing something wrong. It's usually the right behaviors. You've just been working with half of the equation. And usually it's the part of the equation that you already naturally have some mastery over. Because for most of my clients, they have almost always had more depth than the people around them. And that creates a unique type of experience for them growing up, where they do tend to rely on their ability to emotionally attune to people. And because they found themselves in that experience, they tend to resonate with the solutions that put forward that you need more therapy or more emotional skills. When the reality is when it's more like that's your native tongue, you're already skillful at that, what you're needing is to complete the other side of the equation. And that is going to feel more like challenge. And depending on your relationship to challenge, how safe it feels for you to experience and step towards challenge, that's going to determine the outcome that you create, because it really is about integrating the other half of the equation, not just building more muscle in our dominant arm. Because the reality is women desire your heart space work. The amount of emotional intelligence and literacy and your ability to create deep emotional connections for women is going to be your greatest strength in the dating space. If that's not the experience that's being reflected back to you, I can almost guarantee that it's because you're needing a little bit more distinction. And the challenge that I would invite you to lean into is to learn how to stay with yourself in situations where you're already doing the right things, but because you're coming from a place of being disconnected from your actual experience and are not able to stay connected to that in those moments, moments, you're kind of giving your greatest asset, this heart space that you've worked so hard to refine and cultivate and articulate, to just anyone indiscriminately, regardless of their contribution or their behavior when you offer it to them. And this is why you find yourself staying in situations where on some level you know that this isn't how it's supposed to feel. That's because it's not. And I know that's confronting to hear, but I really want to affirm that if it feels like this isn't how it's supposed to feel, it's probably accurate information that you're perceiving. And the fact that you have a hard time trusting that information is the problem that we need to solve. And you do that by defining more of who you are and what you need in a relational context. This is what allows you to bring your full capacity online, of both the depth that you have available and also this grounded sense of solidarity that allows women to experience your presence differently. If you recognized yourself in any of these patterns and you're ready to develop that distinction and that differentiation that allows your emotional openness to actually work, I have a couple ways to help you with that. We have another round of Grounded coming up. I'm going to put all the information you need in the description below. And I love helping men work on this on a one-on-one context. I find that it's something that you have a hard time seeing from being inside the pattern. You really do need not only some external feedback, but also a space that allows your nervous system to relax enough for you to drop into your authentic depth and recalibrate as to what it feels like to be in your own center and to move from that space. This is what's going to allow people to naturally start engaging with you differently, for you to feel really seen and met by people in a new way than you ever have before, and for a new type of potential partners to start showing up for you. Because it's never been that you've been too emotionally available. It really is that when you have opened up your emotional space, you've had a hard time holding on to yourself. Once we master that, everything else just becomes a cherry on top. And I've said this for years, that the recovered nice guy is the one who has the pick of the dating pool right now. So if you're ready to step into a little more distinction in your dating life and see what starts to shift for you, I would love to help you get there. And if this video was helpful, I think you'll also like this one, where I define the difference between what real empathy is versus what you may have been doing so far. As always, I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you next week.